This video is brought to you by my supporters on Patreon.
Hi guys, so I'm here with another Welcome to Cosplay video. And this time the video is going to be on basic tools you need for armor and prop making. I will do an entirely different one for sewing. One of the most important things you will probably need is a heat gun, because if you are working with thermoplastics, if you are working with EVA foam, you'll need one of these. This is the only way you are going to get it to shape the way you want it to shape, and nothing works as good as a heat gun. No hairdryer will not work. It just does not get hot enough. Maybe for a really thin piece of craft foam, but not for the thicker foams, or definitely not for thermoplastic. The other thing you will need is a Dremel, especially if you are working with foam. This just helps create beveled edges, smooth out the sides and smooth down seams, and can add detailing as well. So this is actually really important. Just basic Dremel, I know a wireless one goes for like $20 or something like that, although a wired one is much more convenient. If you get a Dremel, you will need different Dremel bits. You don't need something this fancy. In fact, you may not need a whole bunch of different kinds. I personally only really like to use this one type of Dremel bit, and that is the 120 grit sanding band. I find that it smooths foam the best, and so this is the only one that I use for the longest time. So you can definitely get away with just one type of sanding belt. And since you are working with things like Dremels and a heat gun, you will need some protection. So you definitely need some sort of mask. A ventilation mask of some sort would be ideal. I just use these ones at the moment. They're fairly cheap. They block the dust from getting in your face, as well as help keeps out some of the fumes. And then you will need goggles as well to protect your eyes, because things do fly. You might not see things flying like towards you, but they do, and if they get in your eyes, they can cause some serious damage, especially if it's left there and causes an infection or even makes you go blind. So make sure to protect your eyes and your lungs, and yeah. Next, you will definitely need something to cut your materials with. So a pair of scissors will do. You can have just a normal pair of scissors, or you can have something that cuts through a bit of thicker materials. There are also things like a box cutter or an X-Acto knife as well that cuts through foams and Warbler pretty well. You will need a hot glue gun, because you will need to be able to glue these things together, especially if you're working with like EVA foam. A Warbler can kind of stick to itself, but if you're working with just foam, then a hot glue gun is what you are going to need. When working with insulation foam, you will need sanding paper to sand and smooth it down. I use a 100 medium grit. I find that smooths everything while still shaping it. And so those are pretty much the basic tools you will need. Like the absolute bare minimum is like something to cut the fabric with, a heat gun to shape it, a Dremel to sand it, and if you work with insulation foam, then just sanding paper itself. But if you are wanting to take it just slightly farther, another kind of basic tool you need to, or can use to create details in the foam as well as add in LEDs, you will need a soldering iron and soldering if you're working with LEDs. So I wanted to throw this in here because technically it kind of is a basic tool. And then one last thing, which is also can or cannot be a basic tool. It's not an absolute must. It kind of depends on the material you're working with. If you are working with insulation foam, you will have to use insulation foam board glue if you plan to layer or stack them. You will need a caulking gun, because as far as I know, there are no insulation foam board glue that doesn't that can just be squirted out like normal glue. It always, everyone that I've seen needs a caulking gun. That is another thing that you might have to pick up if that is a material that you use. Alright, now that is it for the basic tools that you will need to get started with your armor and prop making. I will have a different video going over materials as well as other videos going over materials for sewing and tools for sewing. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Have a lovely day. Bye!